How is everybody doing? Welcome back to another live stream on this Monday. We're going to be going over the crypto market for you in today's live stream. I'm also going to be discussing in depth the topic of how long will this bear market last. I've spent an awful lot of time going over levels that I'm looking at for Bitcoin, levels which are interesting to me. I've said many times that anywhere between $40,000 to $60,000 on Bitcoin I believe is the bottoming range, but I think it's important to discuss the topic of time in this live stream because it is something where I don't focus on it enough. You have other YouTubers out there who only discuss the topic of time. They don't discuss price. They only look at time, when things will happen, not the prices that will occur, but when they'll occur. And I think it's important that we add balance and we discuss time-based indicators and put price and time together for the purposes of this live stream. A lot of people have been asking me, when do I believe the bottom will be for Bitcoin? When do I believe the bottom will be for altcoins? Will they both bottom at the same time? Will altcoins bottom first? Are we front running the bear market and we're actually dumping faster than usual? Or is this a bear market which is very much in line with the norm and it just feels faster, but in reality we're moving at the same speed and velocity? We're going to discuss all of that in today's live stream. I'm also going to get through all of your comments as well. So before we get into it, as always, please hit the likes on the stream. I'm doing these daily live streams, even though we're in a bear market, even though people are losing money. I'm doing these daily live streams because, look, we've got a task. The task is to make money in crypto, and it's very important to stick around during the bad days because these are the days that give you the context. And the decisions that you make during the bear market are going to be absolutely crucial to your success in the bull market. I can assure you on that. The projects you buy, when you buy, really makes a difference. So you've got to lock in during the bear market. This is the time to be actually grinding 24/7. And I actually work a lot harder during the bear market because there's more to do. The decisions you make, like I said, are way more important, because you get absolute discounts left, right, and center, and you've just got to buy the right projects. Otherwise, you could be stuck in something like Cardano or Polkadot, which did nothing in 2025. Or maybe you could have bought Solana and you made crazy gains. So the decisions you make in the bear market are absolutely imperative to your success in a bull market. But we're going to be discussing specifically today Bitcoin and altcoins and where I see them bottoming in terms of a time frame. I'll preface this and say that no one truly knows when the bottom will be. All we can do is look at the data and infer from the data and extrapolate from the data and make some assumptions and kind of give probabilities. We can talk probabilistically, but we cannot talk in a sense of what will happen deterministically. No one can do that. So we can't be deterministic, but what we can do is look at the probabilities and discuss them intelligently. So let's get straight into it, guys. Hope everyone's having a great day. And yeah, guys, we've got a lot to get into. So let's get this screen up. We want the right screen. Here we go. So I think it's important to just first of all add some context, which is the fact that we had a top on Bitcoin, which was slightly unusual, okay? Slightly unusual top. Not in the time sense, it was absolutely spot on in terms of a time frame. Okay? So in terms of the time frame, Bitcoin topped, it was perfect. Q4 top, October even, perfect time frame. But if you look at actual topping indicators, basically none of them flashed as a top on Bitcoin. Now, I was one that was consistently saying that a lot of them wouldn't flash. Do you guys remember all those people that would always look at that one site by CoinGlass, the Bitcoin top indicators, and they'd always go on about all these different arbitrary top indicators, and they'd make out that Bitcoin has to top out when all of these flash. Absolute drivel, absolute nonsense. Low IQ, stupid individuals were suggesting that. I was suggesting that this time we would actually have a bit of a lackluster top, and Bitcoin would top out with a slight higher high. Not a major blow off top, but we would have, you know, maybe some form of decent bull run, but not anything special. I was never calling for 150 to 200. My range on Bitcoin since day one was always 117 to 130. Sometimes I said 120, sometimes I said 125, sometimes I said 130, sometimes I said 117. But anywhere in that range was always my Bitcoin topping range. Okay, so I think it's important to just add context and let you guys know that we did have, by all measures in terms of price, an unusual top. Like I said, in terms of the date it topped, not unusual at all. The date that we topped was completely normal. Nothing strange about that being an October post-halving top. Completely normal. What was different was the fact that we topped on boredom. Some people call it apathy. But the reality is we did not top on euphoria. You can look at the fear and greed index. You can look at all those arbitrary indicators that people were talking about, which, let's be real, some of them did flash last cycle. But basically none of them flashed this time. The power law was invalidated. The pi cycle was invalidated. All of these major indicators that people were looking at and focusing on so ardently, all essentially are defunct now. And I always had that belief that we would have some form of lackluster bull market and we wouldn't see the traditional blow off top on Bitcoin. It was almost too obvious because every single person was saying 150 to 200. Bitcoin become mainstream. And I just felt like this would not be the time where we would see that kind of blow off top. So I think it's important when we're discussing the bear market to understand the context of the bull market. It's very important, and a lot of people are not adding that important context. They're talking about the bear market and they're making predictions about the bear market, but they're not factoring in the lackluster bull market which we had, which is very important context, and I'm going to tell you why in a moment. So, Bitcoin, by all measures, had a lackluster top in terms of price. Therefore, I think it is reasonable to suggest that the bear market is not going to be as deep because the bull market was not as high. I think it's reasonable. I think there's a degree of logic in that argument. Now, I'm not saying it has to be that way. I'm not saying we have to have a tamed bear market just because we had a tamed bull market, but I'm saying that there is a logical bit of reasoning behind that claim. And you'll see a lot of people on YouTube, a lot of people on X, bashing anyone who's suggesting that, saying that it's idiocy, saying that it doesn't make sense. But I do believe there's a degree of logic in that train of thought. I'm not saying it has to be that way. I'm not saying just because we had a tamed bull market, we can't go and have a very deep bear market. We absolutely could have that. And one example I would point to, which obviously has nothing to do with crypto, but in terms of the candlesticks, in terms of the bars, if you go and look at 2008, before we had the major crash, 2008 wasn't after a major parabolic blow off top new high on the S&P 500. It was essentially a double top that it did. So this idea that you can't have a deep bear market just because you didn't have a euphoric bull market is untrue. Okay? But that doesn't mean that there is also logic in the argument that there is obviously more of a chance that this bear market isn't as brutal because of the bull market not being as euphoric. There is logic in that argument. Okay? So hopefully everyone understands what I'm saying. What I'm saying in summary is there is more of a chance that this bear market isn't as brutal, but that doesn't mean that it can't be brutal. That doesn't completely invalidate the fact that it could be brutal. Of course it could be brutal. 2008 was a brutal crash, and that was not after a massive euphoric blow off top all-time high on the S&P 500. So you can have a brutal bear market, even if the bull market wasn't amazing. Just getting that out of the way, okay? Very, very important context. So, where do I see us potentially bottoming? I've said many times I see us bottoming between 40k to 60k. That's the range I've given for a long time. I got my top range right. Let's see if I get my bottom range right. And I've been saying this for months, by the way. I've been saying this since maybe October time, that this was the bottom range. Now, technically it's 39k would be the lower target, but let's just call it 40k for the sake of argument, because if we say 39, we're just being awkward. But technically speaking, my lower target is 39k. That's the low target. That's the bear case. The bull case would be kind of around the 200-week moving average, okay? Which is around 60k. So this makes sense. Bull case, 200-week is the bottom. Bear case, 786 fib retracement is the bottom. Every single bear market, Bitcoin has come down to the macro 786 fib. Every single bear market. I'm arguing this time it might not do that. Okay? Because that would be my bear case, not my base case. My base case bottom is actually the golden pocket. That is my base case bottom, is somewhere in the mid-50s. That's what I think is the most likely form of bottom for Bitcoin, which really means it's just one more move lower. And that would make sense if you look at the shorter time frame, where we are currently in a bear pennant. If you look at the shorter time frame, we've actually currently broke down from a bear pennant. We've actually had a breakdown here. So if you actually measure that move, the expected dump would be to like the mid-50s. So that adds up in a short-term analysis format. And it also adds up on a macro analysis because you've got your 200-week moving average and your macro golden pocket both lining up around the same point. Now, what a lot of people say is in 2022, we actually lost the 200-week moving average, which is a fair argument. But people forget that in 2022, we had two major events that led to an even deeper bear market based off the moving averages. Based off percentage, it was a diminishing return. But based off the moving averages, we actually had a more brutal bear market in 2022 than we actually had in 2019, based off the moving averages, not based off percentage. Now, why was that the case? Well, we had two major events that dropped Bitcoin below the 200-week moving average. One event was less obvious, the other was very obvious, okay? The first obvious event was FTX, the collapse of FTX. And the fact that people were hearing about that, they started selling off, and then it was the major Black Swan event at the very end. The second event was the recession under Joe Biden. Very covered up recession, wasn't talked about, but there was very much a recession under Joe Biden during his presidency. But like I said, it was covered up, but the economy was in a bad state. If you go back to 2022 and you look at a lot of the tech stocks, they were crumbling. And that was after a major rally during COVID. They had a massive drawdown after the 2021 highs. So you had multiple things all affecting Bitcoin that led to it going below the 200-week moving average. Now, my argument, and it's been very, very crystal clear, is for Bitcoin to go significantly below the 200-week, not just a couple percent, but significantly below it, meaning 40k or less. I think we need a Black Swan event. At least maybe one, maybe two. You would need some form of FTX crisis, some form of pandemic, some form of World War III. Maybe Iran is the situation that could bring us below it. But it would have to really, really go off badly. It couldn't just be a few strikes on military bases and stuff like that. It has to be serious. Like a mass casualty event for us to go that low, in my opinion. Unless it's just a super drawn-out bear market, which is always possible. I think there's a likely scenario where we find a bear market low in the 50,000 region, the 50s, rather than going deep into the 40s and the 30s. I think there's a very strong scenario that the 50s could be respected. But it's not impossible. I want to make it very clear. I'm not saying that anything is impossible. I'm not saying that 30k or 40k is impossible. What I'm saying is it's not my base case, and I'm telling you what I believe would have to happen in order for that to be the case. So in order for us to go down to the 786 or lower, I believe that we would need some major Black Swan event. It could be directly affecting crypto itself, like a major exchange, like a stablecoin, or it could be an external event such as a World War III, such as a pandemic or something like that, right? We can't always predict these things, but that's why they're Black Swans, right? They happen out of nowhere. So Black Swans are always possible, but I'm not necessarily factoring them into my base case. Now we get into the time discussion, which is the main purpose of this discussion. The main purpose of this is the time side of things. Now, everyone is saying we have to bottom in Q4. Everyone's saying, sell your crypto, come back in Q4. Turn the laptop off, turn your screen off, just delete your crypto apps and just come back in Q4. Forget about everything, forget about the news, forget about Bitcoin, forget about alts, just come back in Q4. Everyone's saying that. Don't you think it's a little bit too obvious? Don't you think it's a little bit too obvious? Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, what about the 4-year cycle top that we just had in October? That was in line with the cyclical trend. So surely the bottom has to be. Now, I've had some deep thought about this. And a lot of it is intuition, okay? Some of this I'm just going off feeling, which I know some people say is a bad thing. But honestly, I think some of the best investors, they trust their gut. They trust their intuition sometimes. And I just have this inclination to believe that a lot of people are going to get wrecked because they're going to miss the bottom. Because they're all waiting until Q4 and they're all holding stables and they're not going to deploy anything until Q4. They're not even going to get their feet wet, let alone going deep into the deep end. They're not even going to get their toes wet. And the reason for that is they are so damn certain that Q4 has to be the bottom. 100% certain. That's how certain they are. And when people have that degree of certainty, they typically tend to get wrecked in markets. That's typically what happens. When there's such a high prevalence of an opinion, when something becomes the consensus viewpoint, when everyone believes it, they typically end up getting wrecked. Maximum pain happens. Now, I know you guys are going to say, well, what about the Q4 top? That was in line with expectation. Well, was it really? Because I was running lots of polls. I've done it a few times. On when do you believe Bitcoin would top? Most people didn't think it would top in line with the 4-year cycle. Yes, that was the obvious scenario, but everyone was doubting it. Everyone was saying, actually, I think we're going to go into 2026. It's going to be an extended cycle. Some people were saying we'll top out to the left of it. Very few people actually stuck by the 4-year cycle and sold during October. Very few people. Maybe the smart money did it, but if you went around retail and you asked people, when do you believe the top will be? I'm not kidding. 90% of YouTubers were saying it wouldn't be Q4. 90% of investors were probably saying it wouldn't be Q4. Everyone was saying either extended cycle or left-leaning cycle. So very few people actually sold in October believing that was the top. But now everyone's saying it has to be Q4 simply because October was the top. So they say the 4-year cycle's still intact. October proves that. Therefore, it has to be a Q4 bottom. And I think that is going to be the trap. The trap is going to be everyone got wrecked not selling in October. So now they're saying, I'm out. I'm out of the game. I'm sitting on my hands until Q4. And they're going to get wrecked that time. Because this market will always cause maximum wreckage. It will always be maximum pain. I genuinely think very few people sold in Q4 or like in October. So many people were expecting an extended cycle because of QE, because of this, because of that. Now, I always had my invalidation point, which was the 50-week moving average, which got invalidated, I think, in early November. That was my invalidation point. That was the point where I sold all the remains I had. But I was taking profits on the way up. But most people, I would say, round-tripped. I don't know the percentage. I can't necessarily give a percentage. I guess we'd have to do a poll, and then we'd have to assume that most people are honest, and we'd have to assume that everyone had to answer it. Because if we did a poll on how many people round-tripped, there'd be a lot of people who were too embarrassed to actually answer the poll. Because I did that poll in my Discord, and loads of the people in the group who I know round-tripped did not answer the poll. So it's hard to get an accurate reading on the percentage of people who round-trip, because most people who round-tripped are too embarrassed. They don't want to mention it. But I would hazard a guess, and I would say that maybe 70% of people round-tripped in the crypto market. Therefore, most people got it wrong. Therefore, most people got wrecked. And I would also guess that 70% of people are in stables right now waiting for a Q4 bottom because they probably sold the bottom. They didn't sell at the top. They didn't sell at the loss of the 50. They probably sold in panic during this massive dump, right? That's what retail do. Retail capitulate, the masses I'm talking about. Not necessarily everyone on this channel, but the masses that watch the normie channels and the crap channels out there. They typically sell on the major capitulation dump. Either there or there they probably sold. And now they're in stables and they got wrecked. And they're saying, I'm not buying until Q4. That's what they're waiting for. So they're probably going to get wrecked again, in my opinion. They're going to sell low and they're going to end up buying high. Because if we start leaving the station, let's just say in the summer, they're going to start jumping in with FOMO. And that's how you have maximum wreckage in this market. Another thing I'm going to mention is this absolute obsession with $40,000. I've already explained $40,000 is a key level, or if we want to be fully specific, it's $39,000. I've explained that is a major level. But the obsession with it is getting crazy now. Everyone is waiting for 40K. And again, when everyone is waiting for something, typically it doesn't happen. Not always. Not always. You know, there's a saying, the masses are always wrong. That saying's actually wrong. The masses aren't always wrong. They're just wrong most of the time. Not always, but maybe 70 or 80% of the time they're wrong. So everyone's saying 40K. I'm not going to buy until 40K. That's what the majority of people are saying. Again, not buying until Q4, not buying until 40K. It worries me. I worry for those people. I mean, if they pull it off and they buy the bottom, happy days. You bought the bottom. Great. You timed it better than me. But if it doesn't get pulled off and they're full on this kind of all-in, all-out approach of they have to time the exact bottom and they don't even want to get their feet wet right now when we have great prices, if it doesn't work, they're going to get absolutely wrecked and they're going to jump in on FOMO. And they'll probably buy in around the time Bitcoin gets to 90 or 100K. That's when they'll buy in. Once we approach that major psychological level of 100K is when they'll FOMO back in. And by that point, altcoins are probably already up 2 to 5x from the lows. And they've missed those gains. So look, I want to be very clear. I'm not talking deterministically. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just talking from, I guess a lot of it is a gut feeling. Because I'll admit, my argument is relatively weak. Because I'm going against the norm. I'm going against the trend. I'm going against the grain. I will admit that I am going against the grain. And that maybe from purely a probability standpoint, my scenario for most people, for most objective people, would be not the base case. Not only am I arguing for the bottom to be earlier than Q4, but I'm also arguing that the bear market won't necessarily be as deep as the 786 fib. So I'm making two arguments against the norm. So it is contrarian. Therefore, it isn't necessarily the probabilistic base case. But I'm just telling you what I think. That's why you guys watch the channel, right? I'm telling you what I think. You know what else wasn't against? You know what else was against the norm? A 126,000 top on Bitcoin. That was against the norm. Because not a single top signal flashed. Yet I was still saying that that would be the topping range. 117 to 130. I was adamant that that would be the topping range, and that was completely and utterly against the norm. Not a single major top signal flashed at that range. Everyone was waiting for 150 to 200 for the top signals to start flashing. I think a lot of them would have flashed around 170. That was the flashing range. None of that happened. So that stance was against the norm, that stance was contrarian, and that stance paid off. So let's see if it happens this time. Anyway, gonna get into some of the comments. But yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Wanted to just, you know, let you guys know what my opinions are on things. We'll see what everyone's saying. Smash up the likes on the stream, by the way. Smash up the likes on the stream. JC Motta says, thank you for not being a moon boy like most of the YouTubers. Well, you're welcome. But you know what? I think moon boy Archie is probably going to make a comeback. You know, I was saying this on the last stream. There's a time to be a moon boy and there's a time to be a bear. I've been a bear for the past, 4 or 5 months? I'm going to be a moon boy soon. Whether you like it or not, there's going to be a time for me to be super bullish. There's going to be a time when we play the Pump It Up song on before the streams. And I'll be hella bullish. Because I do believe Bitcoin's going to 200k. Plus, I think it's going above 200k. I think Ethereum's going to 10k. I think Solana's going to $400. It just wasn't to be in the last bull run. And that was the key part that I was trying to make everyone aware of. Was that last bull run was not the bull run for those prices. Everyone was adamant that it was going to be that way. But I just wasn't seeing it. Now, I wasn't right about everything last bull run, but one thing I was right about was the topping range on Bitcoin. Absolutely spot on that. And so was Bren also, one of the most active members in my Discord. He literally had in his name in the Discord server 125k top for like a year. That was in his name, and he was spot on. That was the exact top, pretty much. $1,000 off. So, look, I don't want to bash people. If you think we're going to 30k, fine. But I have friends who think we are going to 30k, and they've still bought a little bit here. Because they're not certain. You can never be 100% certain. Even if we go to 30 or 40k, you still have to admit that this is still a cheap Bitcoin, as per the big moving averages. You know, the way I value Bitcoin, I talk about this a ton in my course, by the way. If you're not on the course, get on the course, because it's going to be having its full release, I believe, let's see, today is it? Or is it still on the wait list? I think you can watch the course. So if you join the course today, you should be able to watch it. So I talk about this a ton on the course. The moving averages and loads of stuff like that. And so does Cryptex. There's an entire part of the course done by my technical analyst. Highly recommend you get on this course. It goes through all of my strategy for 2026. And it's essentially just a strategic blueprint in navigating the year. Every single review for my page is 5 stars. And it's an absolute no-brainer to get on the course, guys. It's about 3 hours long. And there's going to be additional videos getting put on it every single month. Every single month of the whole year, there's going to be additional videos getting put on it. So highly recommend you sign up to the course. You can get it as part of the big bundle as well, which gives you lifetime mentorship and Discord access. So you'll be getting my buy alerts, sell alerts, and lifetime one-to-one mentorship for the rest of your life. Great deal. All of that is available on the link in the description. So someone asks in the chat, is Hyperliquid slowly going into my buy zone? Still not yet, you know. I'm going to be super honest that I'm going to be very picky with Hyperliquid because it has got quite a high valuation. Valuation of 6.8 billion. For me to buy this thing, it has to, I know it sounds crazy, it probably has to go down to around the April lows of $10, which I know sounds absolutely insane considering it's at 26 right now, but I'm just going to be super picky with this one because I do believe the valuation is quite high. And if you look at the FDV is 25 billion, the market cap's 6 billion. So you are buying quite a premium on Hyperliquid. It's got a premium for sure because it is the best DEX. But I'm not too sure if I want to pay that premium or if I'd rather buy something like Asta, which in my opinion is much cheaper than Hyperliquid and has a lot more ROI potential. Also, guys, check out Blowfin. There's a link to Blowfin in the description. This is the exchange that I personally use. I have limit orders set on Bitcoin on Blowfin, and I highly recommend that you guys check it out as well. It is a great way to actually accumulate Bitcoin when it has these big scam wicks. You set limit orders and they'll get filled. If you try and time it, it's going to be very difficult. You're probably sleeping when it crashes. So if you set limit orders on Blowfin, you're going to be absolutely perfect. And it's also a good exchange for using leverage. The great thing about Blowfin is that it's non-KYC, so you can use it anywhere in the world. I recommend a VPN just in general, just good for your privacy and your protection online, your data protection. But you can use it in the US, you can use it anywhere in the world. You don't have to put your passport details in. And if you use my link down below, you'll get special sign-up rewards that you wouldn't otherwise get. So check it out. All right, let's get into some of the comments. Smash those likes up on the stream. We have 220 people watching live on YouTube. Let's get those likes up. You know what? I'm getting more views on these live streams than I was in the bull run, which is pretty crazy because most YouTubers right now are going bankrupt. But it's good to see everyone in the stream. We got 69 likes. Let's try and get it up to 169. How about that? Let's see what you guys are saying. Would I buy H-bar now? I think it could go lower, personally, so I'm not buying it here. I think there's other alts that look more bottom, but I do like H-bar fundamentally. If ETH goes to $800 to $1,000, that's an easy buy. I do agree with that. I think that's a great buy, but it's not a guarantee that it goes there. If you look at Ethereum, it's actually on major support. Let me find the right Ethereum chart for you guys. Here we go. So this is my Ethereum chart. It's actually on major support, or it's approaching major support, which is this trend line, which stems all the way back to 2022, this support trend line. It could lose it. In that case, I would probably be targeting 1.3K all the way down to 800. That would be my DCA range for Ethereum if it does end up losing that macro trend line. But most likely, I see it holding it, or there or thereabouts. I mean, it might wick down like it did back in April or back in June, a bit of a scam wick. But I assume that it's not going to spend too much time below that trend line unless we have a very deep bear market, which I obviously explained earlier on in the stream is possible, but not my base case. And these are my top altcoins, by the way, if anyone's new on the channel. Bitcoin obviously isn't an alt, but then Solana, Sui, Casper, Tau, Sei, Aster, Plasma, XPL, and then the VIP gem, which you gain access to if you are part of my VIP membership, which gives you a load of perks, buy alerts, sell alerts, 24/7 Discord access. I'm going to be in the voice chat after this live stream, by the way, talking to the members about the market. And we're going to be doing some deep dives on some altcoins outside of my portfolio. So the purpose of this voice chat we're going to be doing after this stream is to purposely try and find some altcoins which have big potential, which I'm not currently holding. So that's going to be a must-join voice chat if you're interested in gem hunting and finding the best projects to hold. Because, guys, it's going to make a huge difference, the projects that you're in. Don't think that you can just willy-nilly it and just buy any project and get rich. You absolutely won't. Gone are those days in crypto. You have to be in the right plays. And most people, for most of 2025, were in the complete wrong plays. That's why they didn't make a 10x in 10 days on Avantis. That's why they didn't make a ton of money on Sui. And that's why they missed Troll. They missed all the good buy alerts from me. Because they were just in the wrong, stupid-ass projects that were super slow with their growth. The likes of Cardano and loads of these slow dinosaur coins. You've got to be in the right projects. And this is my job. This is what I do all day, 24/7, all the time. I'm dedicated to one thing. And yes, I have properties, but that is 1% of my time, if that. Most of my time is researching cryptos, researching this market. Obviously, there's a big amount of economics involved in my job as well, and stock market analysis and political analysis. But the main top and bottom of it is I do this for a living. I research cryptos for a living. So I managed to find good cryptos. Another one was Morpho. Morpho did very well. Zora did very well, did a 2x in a day. So yeah, I'm going to be doing my utmost best to try and find the very best projects to invest in for the next couple of years, Because as I've said earlier, I believe the next bull run won't be a trash bull run like 2025 was. Just because 2025 was a lackluster bull run does not mean that every bull run going forward is going to be lackluster. People need to get that logical fallacy out of their heads. The idea that every bull run going forward now is just going to be super bad and boring and tamed. Not true. This was the exception to the rule. The rule still applies, in my opinion, that we have major bull runs, major alt seasons in crypto. The rule still applies. This, for me, was just the exception to the rule. Aerodrome was another one, yeah. Aero did great. Yeah, we got into Sui at 70 cents. We rode it up to 5 cents. That thing exploded. Fire down below with the $5 donation says, if next bull run peak has Bitcoin at 200K and Ethereum is at 10K, what price do I believe Cardano will be at? Honestly, nothing special. Because Cardano is one of those coins which just doesn't really get any adoption. It's more of an intellectual coin. I don't think it would even surpass its all-time high. Maybe it double top around its all-time high. Maybe it goes to the 786. Extension, that is, by the way, not retracement. You got 2 ways of doing your fibs. If you don't already know about that, you got to get on the course and you're going to learn more about that from Cryptex. But let me show you. So what usually happens with altcoins which aren't as popular is they typically find their tops around the 786 fib. So the 786 fib on Cardano would be $2.50. So $2.50 would maybe be like my target on Cardano for when Bitcoin hits 200K. This is just one of those alts that bleeds to Bitcoin. I mean, look at this price action. On a positive note, there is very strong support on Cardano around this region, you know, to be positive. But to be super negative, this altcoin just keeps on making lower lows. And the other really bad thing about Cardano is it bottomed in January of 2023. Very, very bad. It bottomed a whole year after the whole rest of the crypto market bottomed. A whole year. So Bitcoin, Solana, all these good alts were all in bull runs, and Cardano was continuing its bear market down. Sorry, it wasn't January. It was November 2023. October, November 23, not January. January would be the beginning. It was the end of 2023. So basically a whole year. So this is when, that's when most alts found their bottom. That first circle. This is when Cardano found its bottom. Later on. So it just didn't do well, man. I'm not a fan of Cardano. I used to hold it. And it will probably have some form of a comeback rally, like I said. But there's just much better risk to reward ratios out there with other cryptos. Yeah, people made great gains following my buy and sells, but they're going to make even better gains in the next few years. Because we made good money during a very bad market environment. We still made great money. So imagine the gains we're going to make during a good market environment. I can't even imagine, man. I'm too excited. I can't even imagine what's going to happen in the next couple years for the people in the group. Tim says, smash up the likes. Yeah, let's get those likes up. It already looks the same as the 2022 bear market. We're halfway through May, June. So if this is June 2022, then that implies that we're basically at the bottom. Because in June 2022, Bitcoin went to 17K. And then in Q4, it went to 15K. So if this is equivalent to June 2022, then that essentially means we are basically at the bottom. We are $2,000 away from the bottom, in other words. So that is an insanely good proposition for me if that's the case. Yeah, Robinhood stocks looking good. Let's check Robinhood actually. Because I was planning on building a bit of a position in Robinhood as a DCA, as a long-term stock market position. So it's got a macro golden pocket around $63. It looks like it's bound for that. That's also the 2025 February high. So it seems pretty likely that Robinhood could pull back to that 2025 Feb high and then potentially get a nice bounce. I do think retail are going to come back into the market. And Robinhood is that perfect stock for retail investors. But look at today, guys. We're getting absolutely wrecked. I did want to do a little bit of short-term analysis on the market because we've mainly talked about macro analysis in this stream. But if we want to check Bitcoin, we can check it on the 4-hour and we can clearly see that we are very much fulfilling this bear pennant that I've been talking about now for a while. Clearly, this is occurring right now. We're bleeding out. And in terms of a short-term target on Bitcoin, I am targeting that golden pocket as a potential bullish divergence. And I said to you guys on one of the recent streams that it would actually be bullish on Bitcoin if we can go slightly lower. If Bitcoin can go slightly lower and then we can print a bullish divergence, meaning just for those who don't know, a bullish divergence is when the RSI goes slightly higher and yet the price actually goes lower. That's a bullish div. Yeah, Bitcoin does look like it wants to go down more. I'm targeting like the mid 50s as the next move, and then I do think we get more of a sustained bounce. This could be in line with what's going on with Iran and everything. If that situation flares up, then that could mark the bottom. Someone's asking about Altcoin. So Altcoin's one of the alts I want to get into on the voice chat later with you guys on the VIP. I know you're a VIP GTO, so we'll see you over there. But Altcoin perfectly did this M pattern. Remember that? I showed you guys that ages ago. And it's absolutely bleeding out here. Not a whole deal of support for this thing, gotta be honest. It's lost pretty much all the major support. I mean, there's a wick down here in December 2024. Let's do some macro fibs, see what we have here. So yeah, lost everything. This one looks brutal, man. Altcoin is getting obliterated, man. Wow. I don't know where the floor will be for this. I'm actually worried. I don't know where the floor will be. It's genuinely hard to even find a floor because it's lost now every level of support. I don't know where the floor will be. This is one of those alts that actually scares me looking at this chart. It's lost everything. It's lost the entire base. I mean, unless I'm missing some hidden major support level here, I honestly don't know where this could bottom out at. The best thing you can do is just buy Altcoin when you think Bitcoin's bottomed. Don't try and do too much individual TA on this because it's honestly looking pretty defunct at the minute. Altcoin free falling. Altcoin looks great. Why does it look great other than the fact it's dumped a lot? I don't really see it on any major support unless I'm missing something. What is my thoughts on gold and silver? I wouldn't buy them. I think they're getting close to some form of macro multi-decade top. And if you do buy the top, you're risking holding them for a decade or two before you get back in profits. They could keep going higher, but I do believe they're getting very close now to either the top is in or it's going to be quite close. Did you guys see that article, by the way, on like 2028 and the next major crisis with the S&P 500 and AI and everything? Did any of you guys read that article that was going around on X? Love the Discord, says Joey. Great to hear. 789 AD says, don't go solo on crypto, ladies. Just join the VIP. Yeah, specifically ladies. Or is that laddies? Laddies or ladies? But yeah, definitely join the VIP, ladies and gentlemen. Everyone should join. You know, people assume, like, if you look at these comments, it's pretty much all men. But there's actually more women in crypto than what people think. I guess there's about 50 to 80 women in the group, maybe. There's actually quite a lot. The men just seem to be louder. The longer the bear market stays, the longer I have to accumulate. Yep, I have no problem if the bear market continues for a while. I don't want it. I mean, I want it to. I want the bear market to continue for a long time. I want it to continue for a whole year because that'll give me really good buys. I just don't think it will. I want it to, but I don't think it will. I think it's going to get front ran because everyone's saying Q4. I think it's going to be earlier than that, and it's going to be front ran, and it's very evident. You know, this was another thing I was going to mention. If you look at Bitcoin, it is currently moving very fast. The velocity of this bear market is insanely quick. If you measure the time it's taken Bitcoin to effectively go from the 50 week to the 200 week, it's been quicker than 2022, if you count that as hitting the 200 week. This has been a quicker move between the two moving averages. The only example I can point to where it was quicker was the COVID crash, which was a flash crash event due to a pandemic. So, I mean, that's the exception to the rule. We went straight down from the 50 to the 200 instantly. It was just a straight down move. If you take that away, every other time, it's taken a while, guys. I mean, look at this. It was August 2014 down to January 2015. What was this period? So 2022, we lost it, let's just say November 2021. And then we came down and hit it in middle to end of June 2022. So that's what, like 7 months it took. This time, November to Feb, effectively. So a few months. I mean, if you count this as a hit, a few months. Very quick. Yeah, Bitcoin's coming down to 60K soon. I think so. But you better buy up this dip, I think, because we're not going to be down for long. And these are going to be generational opportunities, in my opinion. And whenever I buy anything, I'm going to be letting the VIPs know in real time. The moment I pull the trigger, I'll be letting them know. So highly recommend people join. How many trades are going on right now in the VIP? I don't know. There's a few. No real support for altcoins, so I think it will bleed to 70 to 100 mil market cap. Yeah, there's no support, man. Honestly, this thing could come down to like, what, 10 cents? Maybe the next psychological level. It's hard to even know where this is going. But this looks brutal. And I actually think this meme has a lot of potential, but the chart just looks insanely bad. Real bear market chart right there. But on a positive note, others is approaching major support again. I hope it holds, because if it doesn't, man, I mean, it's kind of invalidating this really potentially bullish chart, which kind of looks like gold. Because, guys, this is exactly what gold looked like before it exploded. Gold looked exactly like the others chart before it exploded. A few years of sideways, followed by a major breakout, and then that's when we entered price discovery on gold. It looks very similar to the others chart on the 2-week. But if we lose this support, then it kind of invalidates that whole potential bull case that we have. So I am hoping that others stays intact. But guys, I've got a lot to discuss with my VIP members in the Discord, so definitely come over to the group. I highly recommend people get on the bundle, because that way you get the VIP, you actually get the mentor tier, which is even higher than the VIP, and you get my brand new course that I've done, 3 hours of content, about 2 hours by myself and about an hour by Cryptex. Extremely insightful. And yeah, the price is only going to keep going up. So we're probably going to raise the price either tomorrow or the day after. I'm still deciding on the price. I don't know how much I will increase it by. But it's probably going to be quite a significant price hike. So I highly recommend you join now while the price is the cheapest it'll ever be. And guys, I'll see you all over in the Discord. I'm looking forward to a good chat with all the VIP members. Hopefully as many of you guys join as possible. And we can go through some potential altcoins to be buying. I want to look at Fartcoin in a bit more depth. And a few other alts that I'm not going to mention on this stream. So come over to the VIP. I'll see you guys over there. And yeah,